Spoilers are here for chapter 370 of My Hero Academia, so let's get right into them. Shout out to Rukasu, shout out to Justice, Dabi's pole dance, everyone who took part in sharing the leaks, and let's do it. So according to Rukasu, the chapter begins with a flashback from Spinner's hometown. And by the way, chapter 370 is called History, but I guess when it's translated, it's going to be spelled like his story, right? So H-I-S is capital, and then the rest is going to be lowercase. So it's history, but it's also his story. Hori with the bars. Okay, Drizzy. The chapter begins with a flashback from Spinner's hometown. People are throwing stones at him, saying that he's a disgrace to their town and that mutants will never be accepted, no matter how much the time changes. This flashback, though, ends with Spinner facing the ocean. Now, next, there's some context that we very much need about what's happening. All for one assumed that Kurogiri would be at the central hospital and sent Spinner, some of the remnants of the PLA, and several civilians who follow them to attack the place. There are about 15,000 people there, most of them mutants. So looking at the pages that Dabi's pole dance and Justice have, obviously which we can't share in the video, of course, because, you know, problems. I do see what looks like kind of like a small country town or a small village, right? Kind of modern day village with a mob of people, right? Throwing rocks and yeah, doing exactly like Rukasu said in that first page. And again, we do see a shot of Spinner kind of looking out and seeing what else is possible out there in a very similar Attack on Titan sense, right? You look at the sea when things are not good where you currently are as a way of looking out to the world, right? And looking for possibilities and possible places that you can take yourself or possible places you can go to maybe live a better life. And then on that second page, we do cut back to the present with Spinner smiling all completely hulked out as he tries to make his way towards Central Hospital. And on the third page, in the massive crowd of different mutant quirk users, they're actually carrying the heads, or the mask at least, of the CRC members that we saw the League of Villains take out right in the beginning of My Villain Academia. That was actually cut out in the anime. Of course it was. Anything having to do with Spinner, Bones just gets rid of it like an extra tail. But the CRC obviously was the Creature Rejection Clan, pretty much My Hero Academia's version of that group that we don't even want to talk about or give any attention to. But you know, they just don't like mutants and don't think mutants should exist and commit evil acts against mutants, and they meet in secret and wear hoods, and come on, you know they're bad guys. So when we originally saw the League of Villains take a lot of them out, or at least take out one of their main bases or meeting spots, because that's where the League started living for a while, I thought that was pretty awesome and not something that should have been cut in the anime. But now here we go, we have these guys again reappearing as just heads on pikes, pretty much very Game of Thrones style. And I like the idea that yes, you have this giant kind of group of 15,000 mutants. I would like to believe that part of the reason they're so loyal to Spinner is because he's taken down CRC members like this, and they probably did lead a short campaign when everyone was broken out of prison to take down all these CRC members and all these bases, something that we didn't end up seeing in its own arc. But we do know that Horikoshi did originally intend for the whole mutant discrimination arc to be its own sort of thing, and now it's getting squeezed into the final section of My Hero Academia. So let's see how it's being handled. So the heroes are trying to contain all the mutant quirk users, but counting the police, they only equal up to 200 in number. Now, President Mike thinks to himself that Shirakumo has become quite popular, because President Mike is actually here, of course, defending his friend Shirakumo from anyone else who would try to come and get him, because, you know, they just got their friend back last season in My Hero Academia's anime. And this is where we see President Mike trying to make a big difference in this battle, right, against this massive wave, because we know that President Mike is definitely like very good at AoE attacks, right? He's gonna send out a giant sound wave from his mouth in most situations and take out a big section of the enemy combatants. But in this situation, that's not what happens with President Mike. Actually, according to Rukasu, President Mike tries to use loud out shout, but one of the mutants stops the sound by blocking it with his own body. So that probably means that there are mutants here, or at least one, that has sound blocking properties, which is gonna be very difficult for President Mike to deal with, since his whole thing, of course, is sound. Maybe you can try to like go over, but it just reminds me of All Might versus the Nomu that was specifically made to counter All Might. You're gonna really have to go plus ultra, President Mike, if you want to make any headway there. Now, according to Rukasu, a mutant shark tries to hit Mike, but Koda controls some birds to protect President Mike by pretty much having the birds fly into Mike and move him away from the attack. Koda says that he got separated from Shoji, and the cops want to call for reinforcements, but their chief says it's impossible, there's just not enough numbers probably for this situation, and tells everyone to start using their taser shields to push the mutants away. And that is very much what we see on the page stage that we actually have, with blackbirds flying up to President Mike and pretty much carrying him down to safety, which, you know, really strong birds there, Coda. And Coda actually looking kind of cool for one of the only times that I've ever been able to probably say that. But on the bottom left panel of the screen, we have Rocklock, who's getting completely surrounded by a bunch of mutant quirk users, including the 2 mutant quirk users that we've seen before who dressed up as Spinner. I mean, the first 2 that we saw where we were like, Spinner has fans, awesome. Those 2 are also there trying to wrap up Rocklock. And that's because they've gathered around Rocklock and he tells them to stop, but they have furious expressions on all of their faces as they say that people with human appearances will never understand what they're feeling. And as they rage on, you start to see that a lot of the people here actually have flags that they have with Spinner's face just on the flag that they're waving around. And also you see other people with just shirts that have Spinner on the shirt, right? Just all sorts of different characters united under the banner of Spinner. Now, Coda gets singled out here, obviously, because Coda is a mutant quirk user, and apparently they begin to attack Coda, who's knocked to the ground, but he doesn't understand why this is happening to him. And one of the mutants ends up calling him a traitor and asked if he grew up in a big city, right? Like you really wouldn't understand what we're going through because you probably grew up in a big city where, yeah, you guys are a little more accepted, right? Like people have to sort of act a certain way, or people at least have a little bit of a different mentality out here. But I think the way that the mutants see it is no matter where you are, there's always this underbelly, right, of people looking at mutant quirk users like, ugh. And it seems like their experience is that in the more rural parts of the country, they deal with way more, I guess, mutantism. It's racism. That's really what it is at the end of the day. And I feel like this is something that a lot of people can understand because it definitely rings true even in our real world, right? Like in the United States, there's a lot of parts of the country that you definitely wouldn't want to go to because they're extremely unwelcoming to people who don't look exactly like them. And that's exactly what we're seeing here in My Hero Academia, right? The more rural parts of the country are the parts where people are really facing this level of discrimination. And then in the big cities, people, especially these mutant quirk users, are kind of growing up in the lap of luxury because they're not facing the same level of discrimination, or at least that's how the other mutant quirk users feel, because they feel like they're not facing the same level of discrimination, and now they're not on their sides and they're heroes and stuff, and they're not really fighting for their cause. So clearly they just can't understand the cause. And with that, and even if not that, that makes them traitors. It's here that we see one of the PLF generals making a speech on top of a building. It's the one that has he has spider legs coming out of his back or something, and he has a mask of a big kind of fur trim. And he says that quirk counseling, something that we learned about in My Villain Academia thanks to Curious, is useless, and that it's the mutant quirk users themselves who have to directly deal with the consequences. He mentions Incident 66 and the Great Purge of Jeddah as examples of mutant groups being exterminated by people who simply said that they were gross. And now we know Incident 66 is obviously going to be a reference to Order 66 in Star Wars. Horikoshi just once again showing how big of a Star Wars fan he is. But the Great Purge of Jeddah, is that just the Great Purge of Jedi? I mean, wouldn't those two be the same thing in Star Wars, right? The Great Purge of Jedi and Order 66, I would think would be the same thing, but maybe those aren't the same thing. I have to do some Googling on Star Wars again. But yes, Incident 66 and the Great Purge of Jeddah are apparently 2 incidents where people gathered in support of exterminating mutants, and those mutants were apparently exterminated, leading to the radicalization of all the mutants that you see right now in the story supporting Spinner's cause. The speech continues to say that it only looks like things have improved, with Nezu and other mutants occupying positions of power or walking freely on the streets. But that's just make pretend. Non-mutants are still the majority, and the education system does not teach proper acceptance of differences. And there, I suppose that's another valid point. If people just from the education level aren't taught not to be ignorant towards mutant quirk users and taught not to just be hateful towards them for no reason, then it's just going to continue. And I feel like the mutant quirk users feel like, yeah, we have a couple people here in important places, but we're really not in enough positions of power for it to really benefit us overall in society. Because at the end of the day, the people that are teaching most people, or the people that are interacting with most people, at least at those higher levels of power, aren't mutant quirk users. So they're allowed to play all their games and continue, dealing with non-mutant quirk users and having all their biases because they aren't directly presented with mutant quirk users in their day-to-day experience. And now the mutant quirk users are saying that people like Nezu were kind of just there as tokens, right? So you can look and say, well, look at Nezu. Nezu's there, you guys are doing fine. But in actuality, they still face very, very extreme racism every day, and often they have things thrown at them, they're ran out of their towns just because they were born with a quirk that made them look different, and that's not okay. According to this villain, many people still feel the same disgust that those responsible for the massacres felt. He then takes off his mask and said that they have never felt the light of heroism shining on them, and that they've all thought at least once that they'd be better without their quirks. That hits home, right? Because in a story where our main character would do anything to have his quirk, right? Was so desperate to have his quirk. We've seen how desperate a quirkless person can be, right? To have a quirk. Hearing that all these mutant quirk users at some point have wanted to not have that quirk, right? Just be quirkless, just take it away, get rid of it. I just want to be normal. That's really sad, right? Because they really shouldn't feel that way. I think a lot of the mutant quirk users are really awesome. They tend to be some of the more powerful characters in the series. And I also feel like they're definitely on the right side here to a certain extent, right? Like, I think using the downfall of society at the hands of the villains is kind of like, okay, this is odd timing to do this, especially because we know that they are being manipulated by All For One, who is manipulating Spinner, and you know, there's not really like a head of this cause who has good reasoning for the cause or who has good intentions for these mutants. We know that All For One couldn't care less about this cause, honestly, and is just using it as a means to get Kurogiri back. But I suppose that it makes sense that they're willing to go this far because, again, they feel like people still feel the same hatred that they felt when they did all those massacres on mutant kind before. So of course they're going to try to do something about it now because they feel like, hey, we're not letting you do that again. There's not about to be another Incident 66 or a purge of the Jedha. This general says that mutants don't recognize the heroes as their saviors. The one who will guide society to a better path is Spinner. As he says this, we again see the Spinner flag and several mutants cheering for him, saying that they will lead the way and that he must win. Because again, remember, everyone is trying to go towards the hospital to get Kurogiri. But Spinner doesn't even understand what they're talking about. All that goes through his heads are words like All For One and power. And that's the issue, right? Like, everyone here is united under the banner of Spinner, but Spinner has been toyed with by All For One. So Spinner's not here thinking about some cause or anything. Spinner's not here thinking about like, oh yeah, you know, mutant justice. Spinner's here like, mash, you know, he's really not thinking all that much here. He's just a figurehead placed there by All For One, a mini Makia, if you will. And that's when Spinner prepares to attack two cops, but Shoji finally appears and attacks him, and Shoji unleashes an octo brawl against Spinner, which, if you don't know, because we don't see a lot of Shoji fighting, is just kind of like a, you know, gum Gatling, I guess, you know, multiple punches, aura. The mutants immediately advance on Shoji, calling him a traitor and saying that they'll kill him. He then briefly remembers people who wanted him dead because of how he looks when he was younger, and asks what attacking the hospital has to do with their cause, which, you know, it kind of tells us like Shoji to a certain extent, of course, understands what they're going through and what their cause is, and he's like, hey, yeah, no, I understand what this feels like. I don't necessarily disagree with your cause in and of itself, just what does this hospital specifically have to do with it? You know what I mean? Like, what does capturing Kurogiri have to do with your cause, really? Shoji continues to say that in the previous war, the first thing the heroes did was ensure the safety of the patients in Jakku Hospital, something that the mutants didn't even think about. We then see a flashback of Shoji with bandages on his face, facing the ocean, just like Spinner. And I want to actually suggest here, I low-key think that Shoji and Spinner were from the same town, right? Or were born in the same town, because in the little flashback of Shoji, it does kind of look like he's in a grassy, kind of hilly area, not necessarily in like a modern day sort of full-on, you know, Tokyo town. And of course, Japan is a big island, so he would have a view of the ocean from pretty much anywhere that he went. But I'd like to think that that actually was also the same spot that Spinner was looking towards the ocean from, right? Or maybe definitely not across the ocean, because that wouldn't make any sense. But I just feel like there are a lot of parallels between Spinner and Shoji, and it is going to be interesting to see how, you know, those are fleshed out as this section of the story continues, because this is clearly something that Horikoshi wanted to get into before. Shoji then asks once again if they're thinking about the consequences of their actions, and if they're not, he will not forgive them. And in the panel, we finally see Shoji's face, which we've seen in that art a long time ago, but this is the first canon time that we've seen Shoji's face in the series, as he lashes out against all the people that are kind of standing on him, stepping on him, punching him down, and launches them going flying, and begins his counterattack, which is likely going to continue next chapter. So those are the events of My Hero Academia chapter 370. Horikoshi's author comment apparently is going to be, every time I come home, my cat welcomes me with a jumping hug. It's so cute. That's really cute. And yeah, that's everything going on of My Hero Academia chapter 370. It was a discrimination arc sort of chapter that we have between Shoji and Spinner and all the mutants in My Hero Academia. So we're going to further talk about it a little more as the week goes on. I know you guys have felt a little left out in the cold because I've been doing some Chainsaw Man stuff lately, but no worries, I am going to have some more My Hero stuff beside the Chainsaw Man stuff, so keep your eyes peeled. We'll have some more soon. I'll see you guys later. It's Pineapple. Peace.